Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mental Health Awareness Panel discussion brought to you by Anytown Las Vegas, the longest running anti-racism youth program in Nevada, which has served over 4,000 high school students since 1983. Our program is a social investment in creating a pool of today's leaders that sincerely care about breaking down barriers and building up communities. My name is Shaun Mabanta. I am a member of the Anytown Youth Council, a junior at the University of Nevada, Reno, majoring in biochemistry, and your moderator for today's discussion. We are gathered here today to talk about youth mental health, to address challenges and concerns directly affecting youth in Southern Nevada. To our panelists, thank you for your commitment to this very critical conversation. To our virtual community, we encourage you to engage in this conversation, and towards the end, we will go into a Q&A session to answer questions that you all sent in. But before we jump into this critical conversation, I would like for each of you to introduce yourselves to our viewers and tell us a little bit about your work. So we're going to start off with our first panelist. She was my old student council teacher back when I was in high school. This is Ashley Van Ness.
Hi, I am Ashley Van Ness, and I am passionate about teens and mental health and helping people feel loved. And I'm super excited to be here today. I'm currently a teacher at Liberty High School in Henderson, Nevada, and I run the student council there. So thank you, Shaun, for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mrs. Van Ness. Next up, we have Bridget Gannigan.
Hi, my name is Bridget. I'm the founder of the Beehive Women and Teens Las Vegas. I'm also a director for Clark County Parks and Rec preschool program, and I'm a mother of 4. So I'm so happy to be here, here for the community, and that's it.
Thank you, Bridget. And next we have a high school senior, Eden Abibi.
Hello, everyone. My name is Eden Abibi. I'm a rising senior at Southeast Career Technical Academy, and I'm also the student body president there the next year. I'm a youth leader of Youth Power Project Las Vegas, and I'm super passionate about this topic as well as social justice.
Thank you, Eden. Next up, we have Dr. Faisal Subba, and he is a mental health professional.
I'm muted. Hi, Shaun. Thank you very much for including me in this very important discussion. I'm one of the owners of Alliance Mental Health Specialists. It's a psychiatric agency in town. We provide medication management and support to anyone with having mental health crisis or issues. And I'm so happy you put this event together. It's very important.
Thank you so much, Dr. Subba. Next up, we have Jamie Rawson.
Hi, I'm Jamie Rawson. I'm the achievement coach at East Career and Technical Academy. What that means is I work with seniors on their post-high school plans and like a variety of other things to help juniors and seniors prepare for what's after high school.
Thank you, Ms. Rawson. Last but not least, we have Caitlin Mikado.
Hello, everyone. My name is Caitlin Mikado, and I am a junior at the University of Nevada, Reno, majoring in human development and family studies with a minor in psychology. I'm also a part of the Anytown Youth Council, and I'm so excited to be talking about mental health with you all today.
Awesome. Thank you all for introducing yourselves. We have an amazing panel for you all today, including teachers, parents, the college achievement coach at ECTA, as well as a mental health professional. So we'll get a bunch of different perspectives and attack mental health and its stigma right from the roots. So our first question goes to those that are in education or higher education, specifically Eden and Caitlin. So today's conversation is in regards to youth mental health. What mental health issues do youth deal with today? And what are some ways that educators can help students who are struggling with mental health? You could start us off, Caitlin.
Thank you for that question. So I'm entering my junior year of college, which can be very challenging for me. And when it comes to being a college student, it can be difficult to understand that you are not on the same path as someone else. So the feelings of being or feeling left behind can be troubling for someone like me, but that is completely okay. I think there's a lot of comparison involved as well when it comes to being a college student. And that can also be straining on someone's mental health. So I think educators can help us college students out with this by just being understanding and willing to listen to us when things are not going right. I know there are definitely some academic deadlines that students could not miss, but just having the empathy to kind of work with your students and just working with their schedule as well, working with what they have going on at home. And a big thing for me, I know I took my fair share of extensions during this past year because of COVID-19 and how that affected me and my family. And I was lucky enough to have some of the best professors who empathized with me and just allowed me that time to take for myself and to get on the right track again. And I was able to complete my sophomore year with a very nice academic grades.
And then I'll go ahead and jump in there. I definitely agree with everything Caitlin's saying, just as a high school student as well. Teachers and, our educators just treating our students just with grace and, understanding the situation, since we're all struggling in the past year, especially having some extensions were definitely helpful. And I feel like, as well as like that feeling of being alone, especially going into my senior year, having like no idea what I'm going to do for the future, and just, super feeling a little lost, in that sense of I have so much ahead of me, college. I have heard that from many of my classmates of just not knowing what the future holds, kind of. So that definitely causes some like mental like distress, I guess. But having some grace with us and just being there to talk to, because we're all of us feeling lost, talking to each other is maybe like not the best, but having the educators to talk to and lead us in that conversation as well is definitely great.
Thank you both so much for your answers. I definitely agree. And something that just popped up in my mind is that I just want to shout out Hope Means Nevada. They are a mental health organization here based in Nevada. And they recently helped pass a Senate bill. Nevada State Senate Bill 249 makes it possible for students to receive an excused school absence for mental health reasons. Prior, students were excused from school if physically ill, and this bill expands excused absences to reasons of mental health. So I just want to give a huge shout out to them, and let's get right back to our questions. So the next question is for our parents and for our parents in the panel. So as a parent, how do you navigate conversations about mental health with your family, and what are some tips that have worked for you when discussing this critical topic with teens and children? And Mrs. Van Ness, if you could start us off.
I think it's something that we are constantly talking about, and to break that stigma. And I have a 9-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 3-year-old that are my own children. And then I have hundreds of kids on campus that are 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade students I work with in and out every single day. And I think it just needs to be a part of everyday conversation, and how you're feeling and how to, navigate through those emotions, and how to be, it's okay to feel those emotions. And I was just reading a book earlier today, and they were talking about, the woman was talking about how her daughter went in and got her ears pierced, and then she was afraid. And the lady that was trying to get her to pierce her ears was encouraging her, come on, be brave, be brave. But at the end of the day, the daughter needed to be brave by saying no, and that we don't need to be convinced to do something that mentally we're not prepared to do. And so I just think that talking about those kinds of things and being okay with it, And like you guys were saying about school and trying to like work through the pandemic and still be responsible for your classes and being held accountable, but also asking for empathy. I think that going into that side of things, my husband is he works from home. He's an entrepreneur, but sometimes he's not successful in doing that because he is an entrepreneur and he has no one holding him accountable. And all of a sudden, and then he figures it out. But not everyone's an entrepreneur. I get my work done because I have an administrator who's holding me responsible for that thing, and as we're working through this and all of a sudden we expected these 13, 14, 15, 16-year-olds to just be accountable without being in the classroom, being without in that environment, and to do things that even most adults can't do. So I just think that having these conversations and talking about them and sharing the experiences as we go through is so important.
Awesome. And Ms. Rawson, if you could go as well.
I really agree with everything that Ms. Van Ness had to say. I feel like there's a lot in general that we could talk about in terms of mental health and the way that we need to be there for young people to normalize the fact that sometimes things are very difficult, to provide services, a listening ear, support, empathy, all of those things. I also feel like in this moment, in this historic moment, we have to acknowledge that we all went through something really, really difficult and that we're still struggling to process it. I have a lot of concerns as we head back to school in the fall that we're so focused on this notion of learning loss or time that students didn't get to learn that we have to remember that everybody went through a lot. We had students that carried the burden financially for their entire families. We have students that lost family members. We have students coming back from real difficulty, and we went through difficulty. Like Ms. Van Ness was saying, it's like we didn't sign up to teach this way. Students didn't sign up to learn this way. I think that we did the best that we could, but I feel like one of the reasons I'm so glad you're talking about this in this moment is it's always been important, but we're kind of at a crossroads, and we absolutely cannot pretend that because things are getting back to what we're calling normal, we're all just gonna flow and be okay. So I feel like we have to be there and provide a lot of support and allow students to go through the process that they need, that they need to, because it's going to look different for different students, and to feel supported in that and to feel like people understand and that there's not some cycle of punishment based on what you got done or didn't get done because you did the best you could. And that we can pick up from wherever you are and surround you with love and support and help you get back on track. And so those are the things that I'm thinking about right now and as we head into coming back to school in the fall.
Thank you, Ms. Rawson. And lastly, we have Ms. Gannigan.
Hi. Well, I'm going to speak from my parent view because I have four children, all different ages, 28, 26, 18, and 15. I've seen different things happening with their mental health. And here in this house, we have a lot of family meetings. We have a lot of checking up. I'm that mom that jumps in the bed and for no reason and asks what's wrong. Are you okay? And even if I say, is anything wrong? That's the opening conversation, or like, hey, you good? And I give them a lot of opportunity to talk about if something is bothering them. I feel that a lot of teens, especially, they don't have that. Society has not given us the blessing to talk about mental health so openly. A lot of teens feel that it's something to be ashamed of if they're feeling a certain way, or if they're feeling bad about themselves, and if they didn't accomplish a goal, if they just don't have anybody to talk to. it's a problem. It becomes a problem because they leave it all in there, and that's when you have suicide and all these other things that come into play, depression, just across the board. I feel like if you do not have a stable foundation at home to be comfortable to speak about anything that's going on with you, then you should be able to have a place at school that you can, and as a teacher, a counselor. I have interns from Las Vegas PAL program that come to me every year for school, and the first question the first thing that I do is I sit them down and I want to get to know them, and I want to get to know their family life, and I don't bombard them with like all these questions, but I feel like if I need to wiggle my way in there to find out what's really going on. And to be honest, since I've had those teens, they've always come back to me for advice, whether it's with a boyfriend, a parent, teen pregnancy, any one of those things. And I think that because I make it so comfortable to talk about it, and everybody needs somebody to talk to when it comes to these things. And I'm so glad that this is the foundation that we have here, that you've created, that we can talk about this. So that's what I think, my opinions.
Thank you, all three of you, for giving your answers. I 100% agree. Just having that foundation at home or at school is very important. And just a huge shout out to all our parents and teachers out there, especially during COVID, when we were all locked in our homes, for keeping the motivation up, keeping your kids motivated and willing to do things even when things were not going as planned. And then this is a topic you touched on, Ms. Rawson, that I want to, or Ms. Gannigan, that I want to expand upon, is the common reasons why young people struggle with reaching out for help. I find that as a youth, some teens and children find that they are a burden when they talk about their mental health issues or what they're going through mentally. And I just want to throw this over to Dr. Subba. So what are some common reasons why young people struggle with reaching out for help, and how can we as a community alleviate that problem?
Very good question. I want to applaud. Actually, I was very impressed with the answers from the educators and from the parents. One of the main reasons I think that a lot of mental health issues start to occur, especially young children, is their lack of ability to trust and possibly control. There's always a control struggle, like with a power struggle in the family, at school, with friends, things like that. These are always things that affect the child's ability to kind of understand what's going on. If you can't trust and have a good relationship with people that you're close to, like your parents, teachers, neighbors, uncles, aunts, if you can't develop that trust, or worse, if that trust is violated through physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, as you grow and your own emotional, you start to understand your emotions a little bit better. How are you going to trust other people? How are you going to function in relationships in the future? I think developing that trust is super important. Sometimes families have struggles, parents or the people that are the caregivers, the immediate caregivers, they have issues themselves. They have substance use issues, or they have maybe some mental health issues of their own. In those types of situations, the external support, like what we're doing here today, the agencies that we're going to talk about, places where these kids can reach out to, schools, teachers, they are going to play that role, that crucial role, where these young people can learn to trust, understand what love means, the word love. Imagine if you're in a house that's broken, where you're constantly degraded, or being told that you're not good enough, that that you're not going to be able to make it in the world, or that you're useless, or you're being touched inappropriately. If you're having that type of a situation at home, it's so important and so crucial that you have that teacher or someone from an external community resource to be able to bring you up, right? To teach you, that this is what you can trust me. You can come to me. You can talk to me about things. I think these are some of the things. I don't want to take up too much of the program. I'm very, very impressed by this panel and some of the comments that I'm hearing. So I'll chime in whenever you guys need me to. But please go ahead.
No worries at all, Dr. Subba. We are privileged and honored to hear you talk about mental health and all that. Next up, we're going to go back to Eden and Caitlin to talk about what a conversation about mental health looks like between you and your friends, and how can we destigmatize the conversation even more. Eden, if you want to start us off.
Yeah, no problem. So talking to my friends about mental health is honestly just having a safe space to be vulnerable, and it just consists of, just genuine conversation about how our lives are going, how we've been. And honestly, we could just be talking about how are you and how have you been? And then we just jump into mental health from there. And it honestly is sometimes a weekly conversation to have had, because every week, even daily, your mental health is constantly changing, and, your situation and circumstances are constantly changing, which of course affect our mental health. So it's just checking up on one another and also what we struggle with, and just asking oh, how's your anxiety been? Oh, how are you feeling? And just, making sure that we're always good, especially those friends that I'm much closer with and know their struggles and they know of mine. So making sure we're both doing well. And on top of a lot of my friends are in activities and, just things that can just add up, and our workloads and stress, and just asking how we're doing, how we're holding up, and how they can help. And just those conversations do so much for me, and I know they do so much for my friends. So that's what mental health conversations look like in my friend groups.
Cool. Caitlin, if you want to go.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Eden was talking about. I'm so lucky to have such a supportive friend group where if I was just really having a bad day, I could text one of them and be like, I'm sad. Can we talk about something? One, to maybe get my head out of it, or to really dig deep and kind of find a solution to the problem. And something to understand too is sometimes these things that we're going through, sometimes they don't have solutions, or sometimes you kind of just want someone to listen. I know an important thing that I was going through, I kind of just wanted to rant to my friend, and for them to just listen and to not really give me advice on anything. I just wanted to be able to pour my heart and soul out to this person. And in being that listener and that friend that someone is going to, I think it's also crucial to take note, to validate their experience, to validate their emotions, because whatever they're going through might not be a big deal for you as the listener, but it is to them, and they're willing to be vulnerable and to talk to you about these kinds of difficult conversations. So I really have that support system, and I'm so grateful for that. And another thing about my conversations and just me as a person, I am not one to love small talk. I love being able to talk about mental health right away, which can be really difficult. But for some people who might be interested, there is a game called We're Not Really Strangers. It was created by this woman who started creating these conversations in random places. So she would take two chairs and take two strangers, give them this set of cards that had questions. And there's 3 levels. So the first level is kind of just the get to know, what's your first impression. The second level starts getting deeper and deeper. And then the third, you have a bunch of different questions like, how's your family life? How do you feel about me right now? What is something you wish you would have learned when you were younger? And I think it is such a helpful way to start engaging in these kinds of conversations, especially if as a teacher or as a parent, you want to bring it into your classrooms. I think it would be such an amazing way for students to get to know each other as well. Thank you.
Thank you both for your answers. And I think that's so important, is just to break down those barriers and start building these conversations with people. And I love that Caitlin gave a tool that you can use, the We're Not Really Strangers game. I played it myself many times with a bunch of my friends, and I absolutely love how it just almost instantly breaks down those walls that you fronts that you put up with talking to other people about your own mental health or about your own life. Another thing I want to give you guys a tool about is, instead of asking how are you to a friend or a family member or any of the sort, the executive director of Anytown actually told me this, is his name is Rico Ocampo. Of course, we love Rico. And it is, how are you doing mentally? How are you doing spiritually? And how are you doing financially? These three aspects sort of tie into like basically how your whole life is doing, and really opens avenues to answer, like, genuinely, how are you doing in those three aspects of your life, rather than just a simple how are you that can just be often brushed off. I'm going to shift the conversation a little back to our parents and teachers. And this question asks, what would you say to a teen who is reluctant to say how they are feeling because they feel like a burden to their friends and family? And Miss Gannigan, if you could start us off.
I would first gain their trust. I think, like we talked about earlier, the trust issue. You don't know the foundation where they came from, their family. You don't know everything. You don't know the whole story. I always say there is three sides to the story: his story, her story, and the truth. So you don't really know exactly what they're going through. So first gain trust, and then eventually, they'll open up with not prying. I feel, even as parents, when my children say they're okay, and if I can tell or sense that they're not okay, I don't want to keep on prying. I will eventually watch their reactions or notice different things that they're doing, and maybe ask one of their friends if they could talk to them, or a relative, or me and my husband piggyback off of each other. And if we feel that something is going on, if I can't really get my child to talk about it, then he will swoop right in, and he'll be able to take over and be able to feel it out. But it's never to push or to pry. We always want to make sure that person feels comfortable, that teen feels comfortable, that child feels comfortable to be able to come to you. And if it's still not being, it's not that easy for us to get in to see what's wrong, then there's always professional help that we can, offer them. I make it very openly, and that I do see a therapist my own self, because I feel that we should, as humans, be able to talk to somebody else, talk to your friends, talk to your parents, but also get professional help. So that's what I think.
Thank you, Ms. Gannigan. Ms. Rawson, if you could go next.
I agree with Ms. Gannigan that trust is vital. And I think, too, that sometimes students just need to hear right away that what they need has value. And I feel like part of what we're trying to do with high school students is help them be advocates for themselves. And so when I have a student say, there's something I want to talk about, but I don't want to bother you, I try to very directly say, you are never bothering me. Like, I want to answer that right away. I want to help, speak to that voice in your head that says, like, this is my job. This is what I'm here to do, is help you. So you're not bothering me. And then I always try to follow up, how can I help? And I feel like sometimes providing some of those like direct on-ramp tools, if that makes sense, gets students to where they feel comfortable and safe saying what they need. And then I try to celebrate that advocacy. So sometimes if a student has something to say and they say, well, this is what's happening and I need some help, I'm like, yes, I am so glad you reached out. I'm so glad you let me know, because now we can connect you with what you need. So this is exactly what you do when you're having a hard time. Let's get you connected and let's get started in the process. And so I feel like anytime we can speak to that sound that kind of surrounds young people, that their thoughts and needs don't have value, because we want them to advocate for themselves. And so we have to not only model it, we have to celebrate it, and we have to provide on-ramps so that they can do that. So.
Thank you, Ms. Rawson. Ms. Van Ness, if you could go.
I am so happy that you asked this question, because this actually just came back full circle for me. I am always someone who's kind of reading the room for emotions, different, the temperature of people and things like that. I really try to get connected with my students. I teach English as well as student council. And before COVID last year, in-person teaching, there was a student that was emotionally triggered by a novel that we were reading. And I don't know what it was, because to me, it wasn't an emotional time in the novel. And all of a sudden the student was bawling. And I was able to, and I didn't really, I've tried to connect with this student, but she was quiet, and she would, come into class when the bell rang, and she left the class when the bell rang to leave as well, and didn't really say a whole lot, but I always showed her love. Well, this day specifically, she was emotionally, triggered in that sense. And so of course I went over and I checked on her, and I was able to connect with her. And then I led her to the counselor's office. I would let her to someone that maybe she can trust, or I led her to someone that is trained in helping students with that. I'm an education teacher. Now I do a lot of reading and things on my own about mental health. But in this instance, Shaun, like the original question, was what do you do in this circumstance? And I absolutely agree that there's trust there. And I know that I wasn't really that close with this student. So I guided them to the counselor's office. Now this is probably a year and a half, 2 years ago. Well, then on May 21st of this year, one of the English 12 teachers said, I think you're really going to enjoy this, and forwarded me an article. Now in English 12, they do a portfolio, an autobiography portfolio on reflections of where they're at for their final project. And it was a letter to a teacher. And this student, who I don't have a deep connection with, wrote a letter to me. And it was all about when you pulled me back to help comfort me when I broke down that day just over a year ago when classes were in session. It really did mean so much. And she goes on to say more. And then later on it says, and I just pulled it up. It was actually really refreshing to get to actually talk with somebody who had open ears for what I had to say, and led me to the counselor's office to get even more of what I wanted to say out loud. This is a student I haven't really thought about over the past year and a half, and I had no clue that my small action that day had such an impact on her that over a year later, she's still thinking about that moment. And truthfully, Shaun, I was just doing my job of looking and reading my students' temperatures, where they're at, doing what I can, offering an ear, and then guiding them to a professional when they need it more. So I'm always there. And I've been blessed to work with you for many years. And so for some students, I am that trust. But for other students, I'm simply the vehicle to get them to somebody that can help them. So I'm grateful that I have those tools and resources on campus, and that I know how to use them.
Thank you so much, you three, for answering. I'd also like to throw this question to Dr. Subba as well. So how would you attack teens who say they are feeling reluctant to seek out help since they are feeling like a burden to their friends and family?
Well, I just before I answer that, what Miss Vanessa was saying, I want to touch on that a little bit. You know, the importance that the role of a teacher or an agency that's outside, or friends, or family members that are outside of the immediate home, the importance of the role that they play as a conduit. Not necessarily providing the mental health care, because I know one of the students had mentioned that, you know, I was impressed that, you know, she's always very open to talking about mental health issues, and you know, whether it's her own or whether just listening or sometimes just being able to express yourself. These are really, really important things that everyone needs in life. But it's very important that, like what Miss Vanessa did, right? She recognized you know, the warning signs of this student. You know, the student was in an emotional crisis. She engaged, right? She tried to. You have to listen, right? You have to be empathetic. I think that's one of the main things that let them start to open up to you and understand that there's no reason to have that guilt, right? That guilt. And that anxiety of being a burden on your family and your friends and other people, that we have to minimize that somehow. But by being that conduit, by being able to talk to them, by being able to have them express to you, they came to you, and then getting them to someone that can actually engage on a higher level, right? Like a trained mental health specialist, whether it was a counselor, therapist, or psychiatrist, psychologist, whatever it may be, then they can take it from there. But that conduit is super important. I think that, and she did it perfectly. That's exactly how you would do it. Another thing that with depression in general, there's a lot of mental health issues that people go through, right? But with depression in general, a lot of times, so you have to differentiate depression from sadness, right? We all have emotions. We all go through sadness, but depression is sadness to like times like 100. You're immobilized. You don't want to do anything. You don't want to get out of bed. You don't want to take a shower. You don't want to get dressed. You don't want to see anybody. You don't want to. Sometimes you don't want to eat. You don't want to. You just want to sleep all the time, or you may not be able to sleep at all because of the anxiety in your head. This is crippling. This is something that we can see a lot of times in our friends or family members or things of that nature. Those people, when they're in that state, they don't really, sometimes they don't know what it's like to be out of that state. It's like I described to one of my patients the other day. They were feeling really hopeless and helpless. And they're very guilty because they feel like they're being a big burden on their spouse, and they just, they're like, I don't think I can do this anymore, right? So that's a loaded comment. When someone says that, then you know that this is like you're dealing with a very like a higher risk level, right? So I said to them, like, one of the things is like, it's like when you're going through this severe depression, it's like you're driving through. If any of you ever driven through fog, I'm from the East Coast, so we had a lot of fog. But if you're ever driven through fog and you can't see anything, it's like you're paralyzed. Like you have to move very slowly. You don't want to take that next step. You're very scared, and when you're in that moment, you don't really remember what it was like sometimes to be without that fog, right? And then you're like, when will this end? I mean, it's not the most. Obviously, depression is a lot more severe, but just to give you an idea, but the fog does lift. You have to try to talk to them and remind them of the times in the past when that fog wasn't there, how they were at that time. Try to engage them in those types of memories and say, well, you remember when you went through something really difficult in the past, how did you manage to work yourself through that? And at that time, did you feel, like, how did you feel? And they might say, well, I felt hopeless during that time. I didn't think that I was going to be able to get out of it. But you did, right? And let's talk about that a little bit. And let's see how you felt once you overcame that struggle and that difficulty. And then let's try to maybe look at this particular situation and see what we can do. And one last comment, just to say, like, how important it is to get that professional level treatment. It's very easy, like, if you have like a bad hair day, to talk about a bad hair day, but you're not going to necessarily go to your friend or your teacher or your or someone like that to actually cut your hair, right? Because that might not be the best solution to your problem. It might be better to go to that barber or that hair salon or that stylist that actually is that's what they do. That's their job. They know the ins and outs of everything, and maybe to get you out of that situation. It's just like a little analogy that I give sometimes, but it's still important to have that conversation. It's still important to have things like this, because this is what takes that stigma away. By having this conversation, by having like forums like this, where you have students and you have teachers and you have agencies and things like that, where we're able to talk about this, it makes it more. It makes it okay. Right? It's okay to have to struggle with depression. It's okay to struggle with anxiety. We can get you through that, right? That's what we're here for, and that's like the main message. That's something really important.
Thank you so much, Dr. Subba. You touched on so many amazing points. I love the analogy about the fog lifting eventually. I think it's really important that people know that even when they are in that dark, dark hole, that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and there is hope, and there is a way to live a happy, successful life. Touching on the same subject, I want to get another perspective from those that are in high school or in college. Caitlin and Eden, how would you like teachers, educators, and parents to help that feeling of being a burden to your friends and family sort of diminish or go away? And Caitlin, if you could start us off.
Yeah, so in terms of coming from an Asian household, Asian community, I actually had a recent conversation about my own mental health and anxiety with my parents a few days ago, and that was one of the only conversations we've actually ever had. So being able to talk about that so openly with my dad, who we really, I'm telling you, don't have these kind of conversations. It's usually just, how was your day? It was good. All right. Like, that's it. And to be able to have that conversation with him, and him telling me that he didn't even know about the words anxiety, depression, mental health, because he came from the Philippines, and he was telling me that his life up there was just really easygoing, very freeing, free-flowing. And then to come here to the United States, he was like, oh, this is a completely different life. The pressure is different. And because we were able to have that open conversation, it kind of made me break down, because I hadn't had that for the past 20 years of my life up until, again, a few days ago. So being able to have the openness and feeling accepted and vulnerable in those moments was so special to me, especially with a father figure. And then another thing, in terms of having teachers and educators, I remember during my student council conference, my sophomore year, that was one of the first times I actually ever really tried understanding my mental health. And the reason being was because there was a motivational speaker, and they said the words, "It's okay not to be okay." And I know we hear that so often now, but at that time, for me, that was one of the first times it happened. And sophomore year of high school was probably the most difficult year for me. And I also remember breaking down crying, and my friend just held me in that moment. I know, like, I remember the surrounding students were kind of like, what's going on there? But now I just recall that every so often whenever I'm feeling bad, because I got away from it and I was able to grow, not only from that moment, but just learning what resources there are that are available, whether it's on campus or being so open with my family, being so open with my friends. So really, I really think it's just about the space that people provide for you, because you're going to go wherever you feel comfortable. So if you can be that person for someone, it could really change someone's life, as I know it did for me.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. Eden, if you could go.
Thanks for sharing, Caitlin. I really loved your story. But personally for me, that's something I also faced as well. Like, I still to this day struggle with trying to remind myself that I'm not a burden when I want to talk to someone and when I want to reach out. Because when I start, I know I go on and on and on, and I keep talking, and I feel like always like a little guilty, you know. But I think reminding students, educators, and like parents and stuff, reminding your students and kids that may reach out to you that they're not a burden, and just, you know, reassurance is really important. And like Caitlin was saying, just like showing them that acceptance and love when having these conversations is so important. And for parents, for me personally, I also come from like an immigrant household. From my parents are both from Ethiopia, and these conversations aren't really had in my household. But if they were to be had, I wish that I would come to them with, you know, I'd come to them with arms wide open, and, you know, just all that love. And like Caitlin was saying, her friend, just holding her and just, you know, making sure they feel loved and accepted in that moment, and just validating all of their emotions, never saying anything is their fault. Because I've heard many people have experience, you know, coming out to talk to a teacher, and, you know, rather than validating them, they're, you know, blaming them for their problems or blaming them for their emotions. And I think that's not an appropriate time when someone's trying to come out to you, to reach out to you for help, and, you know, being so vulnerable, and, you know, blaming them in those situations, definitely something that also leads to that feeling of being a burden and, oh, this is not what I should be doing, and also causes that stigma once again. So yeah.
Thank you so much, you both, for your answers. This last segment of our discussion before we head into Q&A is about resources. So this is back to Dr. Subba. So going to therapy can be daunting for a lot of people. What does the actual process look like when visiting a therapist, and are there any benefits, or what are the benefits?
Lots of benefits. So, I mean, like we talked about before, one of the most important things is getting to that stage where you can go to the therapist. The last student, she was mentioning that, you know, sometimes, you know, she likes to get engaged, she gets to talk, and but then sometimes you feel like you're being a burden, or you're overdoing it, and, you know, it's like, that's where the therapist comes in, right? That's where there's no guilt, right? So when somebody comes to see me, I do more of medication management. I do some therapy here and there, but I applaud, like, I have a lot of good resources for therapists that we refer out to. And what I always try to tell my clients is that I'm here kind of like working for you. I'm here to make your life better. I'm here to listen, and I'm here to try to understand your feelings, your emotions. You don't have to have any guilt about burdening me. This is what I do, right? This is what I'm here for. So talk to me. You know, let's spend this time together so I can get to know you better. I can understand your situation, and I can maybe try to guide. The difference is, like, a lot of times in therapy, we don't necessarily tell you what to do, but we listen, and we try to guide you to looking at the situation differently, right? Whether it's therapy alone, or sometimes we involve medications and things like that. What those things do is they help to improve your insight. They help to improve your ability to understand your situation. I want to touch on medication just a little bit, because I know there's a lot of stigma based on mental health, just because of that. Like, oh, if I'm going to go see someone, they're going to put me on meds, right? And I don't want to be on meds. I don't want to be dependent on anything. I don't want to be I'm going to be on this for the rest of my life, right? It's going to change me. So, I mean, that's where engaging with the right psychiatrist or provider, someone that's prescribed medications, with a nurse practitioner or physician assistant trained in mental health, or psychiatrist, like engaging with them, making sure they understand you. And what I sometimes explain to my patients is, sometimes as a doctor, right, there's lots of things in our body that can go awry, they don't work always optimally. When you go through a lot of pressure and struggle and your emotions are all over the place, there's a lot of stress on your brain, on your ability to handle some of these stressors. Your neurotransmitters and things like that may not function optimally, right? So by adding medications, I try to tell them, I'm like, think of it more as like a supplement or an enhancer to help you understand the situation better. You may not need to be on it for the rest of your life. You may not, right? But let's see, if you had a headache, you would, sometimes if someone suffers from a severe headache, you during that period of the headache, you can't really think very clearly. You may not be able to do everything that you would want to do, but if you take medication for that headache, the headache goes away and you might be able to think about things a little bit better. Sometimes I always say to my patients that medication may be helpful, but the combination of medication and therapy is the optimal way to treat this. And then, like I said, maybe once we understand what's going on, we're able to understand the situation better. You may not need to be on that medication for the rest of your life, right? You might be able to learn those coping skills or other ways to manage your emotions that you weren't able to do prior to the medications because you just weren't able to put your all into you weren't able to focus entirely on what's going on with you. I don't know if that was helpful in terms of answering that question.
Thank you so much, Dr. Subba. It was definitely helpful. And on the topic of resources, if you look at the bottom of the screen right around here, we have a little banner going on. If you or someone you know is in a crisis and at risk of suicide, please call the National Suicide Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255 or text CARE in all caps to 839-863. This goes to a organization that I work with called Crisis Support Services of Nevada, and they are part of the National Suicide Lifeline. If you just need someone to talk to or just someone to vent to or talk to about your problems, if say parents or teachers are unfortunately not that safe place for you, Crisis Support Services can be that safe place for you. Now I want to bring it back to the parents and teachers on the topic of resources. What are some mental health resources that are available for students in CCSD today, or what resources that have you utilized in the past? And Mrs. Van Ness, if you could start us off.
Well, I will say that I'm familiar with Safe Voice. It is an anonymous resource that you can reach out to if you are feeling overwhelmed or anxious or feeling, that you might have some self-harm or anything like that. And they respond immediately. I am blessed enough to be a part of the Safe Voice team at my school. So I do get to be a part of some of those conversations and the actions. I have weird lighting coming in, sorry. And so that's a phenomenal resource that students can access at any time of day. I know one came in for our school at 2:00 in the morning last night, and somebody answers it all the time. So that's a great resource for anyone in Clark County School District. And of course, our counselors, our school staff, those people that your teachers. I know that for me, it's super important to create an environment within my classroom where students can take off the armor and be themselves. And that might be the only place on campus that they can be themselves is, in my classroom. So I always like to be a resource for them, someone they can reach out to, just to listen to, so I can guide them and get them to somebody like Safe Voice. And I can tell you many times, I have actually guided kids right to Safe Voice as well. If they have called me, recently I had 2 students come in and tell me that they believe that one of their friends was cutting themselves. And so I was able to go speak with my counselor and my principal. And on top of that, they asked that I have the students report it through Safe Voice as well. So then the proper, medical or mental health professionals are able to handle it then. And then I was able to support the students that were reporting it because they were scared too. And they were nervous and they had guilt and they had shame. They knew that their friend was going to be mad at them. It was all of this whole mix of things. So sometimes doing the right thing is a hard thing as well, in order to get people help that they need. But Safe Voice is a great resource.
Thank you, Mrs. Van Ness. Ms. Gannigan, if you could go up next.
So, two places that I have referred some teens to was Ignite Teen Treatment Outpatient. I referred a teen there once, and she, I think she did get some help there. I know that it goes according to your insurance, but another place was UNLV Medicine Mojave Counseling. They have inpatient, outpatient, and I did refer someone there before. And if it's a youth that becomes houseless, I do refer them to Nevada Partnership Homeless Youth. I've had some girls that I've actually offered rides to them as well to drop them off there. But those are the three places that I can think of on top of my head, other than their pastor as well, or church. Some churches have outreach youth programs, and they have counselors there that can help them. So I've done, a few of those.
Thank you, Ms. Gannigan. And last but not least, Ms. Rossi.
So I'm going to echo probably what both of them have said, both Ms. Gannigan and Ms. Van Ness. Safe Voice is a great kind of like catch-all immediate response tool that CCSD has put together for students who are in crisis, who are experiencing any kind of hardship, difficulty, bullying. Any of that can be reported through Safe Voice. One of the tools that Safe Voice activates is something called the CCSD Mobile Crisis Response Team. And they can come to schools, they can come to families' homes. I mean, they've done a lot of work really kind of digging in crisis circumstances and providing really vital, important support. I also think Nevada Partnership for Homeless Youth is a fantastic organization, and working through this CCSD is also connected through Title I Hope. And so sometimes we have other resources that are available for students who are experiencing not just the way that some people consider homelessness, but even just housing insecurity. I also want to make sure that I mention Project 150. Sometimes we have students who some of the things and supports they need, they feel afraid to self-identify or to identify the problem. And sometimes Project 150 can reach out and meet some of those vital needs in the moment as well. And so I think that we have to make sure that we are always trying to connect students to support services. And I know that I'm grateful that CCSD has Safe Voice for students, and that they have built from there this variety of responses. And I agree too that this comes back to what Ms. Gannigan said a while ago about trust, right? About students knowing they can say something to somebody on campus and those people are going to activate. They're going to connect them to services. They're going to find support. They're going to find counselors, administrators, teams, any of those kinds of things that will help students in those crisis moments and help the students who maybe are reporting friends, like Ms. Van Ness said. So there are a lot of great resources, and it's just important that we're constantly getting them out there so students know that they have somewhere to turn.
Thank you so much, you three, for your answers. And I'd also like to bring up the National Suicide Hotline back up as well, at 1-800-273-8255 number. You do not have to call this number just only when you're in a crisis. They can also help you locate resources. So whether you are going through a mental health crisis or dealing with homelessness or substance abuse, stalking, all those different things, you can call this number and they can help you find and locate local resources. Since I know that hearing all these resources at one time may be intimidating, and sort of helping to dissect which resources apply specifically to you, you can call that number for that as well. Last, I'd like to throw it back to Eden and Caitlin. What mental health resources would you like to see implemented in high school and higher education for students? And Eden, if you could go.
Yes, so I think student-led groups that allow students to reach out would definitely be an amazing resource for students. I know at my school recently, as mental health was growing as a problem at my school, unfortunately, we have had, in the past 3 years that I've attended Southeast Career Technical Academy, 2 young girls took their lives, and we realized like mental health should be a priority of our school and the students, mental health as well. So we created a club called Tech Cares, and it's a student-led group, student-led club, basically, where it's just a safe space for students. And also, teachers are there as well to help and, provide professional help. I think it's super important since there's greater trust among, students and, just among your peers rather than teachers in most cases. So just having students to lead that group and knowing it comes from students led by students, and it just provides better trust in that area. But I think having more specialists and psychologists, especially in CCST, since I know we lack many professional help psychologists, I think maybe even having therapists at schools would be amazing to have, just getting professional help. So for example, for myself, like I mentioned earlier, I do come from immigrant household, African parents, and Dr. Subba was telling us how we definitely need to go to therapists. We can't, the analogy made about cutting hair, we wouldn't go to a friend, we'd go to a hairstylist or a barber. And a lot of us do go to friends, and don't have the opportunity to go to therapists. And having conversations about therapists and possibly having a therapist is just a crazy idea to my parents personally. So having better resources for the students that don't have the opportunity as of right now, hopefully in the future when I'm on my own, I hope to get a therapist. But right now, that I don't think that would be possible with the parents that I have. But providing more professional help to students, since many of us come from homes that don't support, mental health and professional help as well. So yeah.
Thank you, Eden. Caitlin, if you could go next.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Eden's take on having that professional help on campus and having these different resources. So currently on the UNR campus, we actually have counseling services, and it's in a central area of our campus, which is great for all of the students and faculty or whoever just needs to go there. And we have one-on-one counseling, group counseling, as well as different tests and programs that you can join and take. But with that being said, I would absolutely love to see more student-led workshops, as Eden was mentioning, whether it be about different methods and exercises if you have anxiety, such as the 5-4-3-2-1 sentence method, which the first time I actually ever heard of that was in the show called The Fosters, and one of the characters was having an anxiety attack, and she was able to kind of ground herself with that. And that's 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. So kind of having different workshops that students can get different methods and exercises for grounding would be great. I also think it would be really cool to have topics surrounding anxiety and academics, because the transition from high school to college can be extremely difficult. I know it was for me, and the workload's a little bit different. So having those conversations or workshops right before midterms or right before finals could be so helpful for students, and to just ease their mind on what's to come. And then lastly, I think it would be really cool to have motivational speakers, because that's kind of what helped me recognize mental health during high school. And for some people, they still really don't know what mental health means to them. So having these speakers come to campus, and I think it's also important to have the resources come to the students, rather than having the students kind of really have the courage to go, because of course we want to encourage people to take up these resources and things like that, but it's important to just be available for the students as well.
Thank you so much, Caitlin and Eden, for both of your answers. I'd like to throw it back to Dr. Subba. I know Eden touched on it a little bit, but sort of that, I want to talk about that barrier to therapy and sort of that financial burden as well. What are some alternative cost-effective options that work other than therapy, Dr. Subba?
Other than therapy, or how can we get cost-effective therapy, or like because I think therapy itself is I think very important. There's there's lots of agencies in town that do sliding scale. If you guys don't have, if the patients don't have insurance, there are resources that were mentioned by a lot of the people. I agree with all of those resources. There are state-run programs and things like that. Because there was so much going on, if with so many different resources. I mean, our agency, Alliance Mental Health Specialists, if someone wants to call, we have people that are trained to kind of guide people to those right resources. So if somebody was to call, that number is 702-485-2100, and we'll do our best to try to guide people to the right resource. We have about 30 providers from various different races, ethnicities, backgrounds. Breaking down this cultural stigma was like a big passion of mine, because I come from an immigrant family as well. They were very happy with my choice of becoming a psychiatrist. But I think it's very important to focus on some of these communities, and so that's why we have a lot of people, a lot of therapists. A lot of providers in our practice that are able to identify with a lot of different minority groups. I think utilizing. So I am not the biggest fan of social media because of its ability to cause a lot of the mental health issues that we face, but it can also be used as a solution. So by forming groups and awareness through social media, some of the students that we're talking today, they're very passionate about this stuff. I think that it would be great for them to pioneer something along those lines and put those resources on the social media websites and things of that nature, so people know where to go to get help.
Thank you, Dr. Subba. And now I'd like to switch the topic to self-care. So this goes out to all our panelists. When did you realize that your own mental health was important? And what do you do for self-care? And I will first give it up for Vanessa.
I would have to agree with Caitlin that I realized I started getting really into self-care from hearing a keynote speaker, and then understanding, like, I'm just being inspired and motivated to feel better from this keynote speaker. And so I craved more and more and more of that. And so a lot of my self-care is from reading. I love reading self-help books, and then whatever is being taught in those books, I like to then fulfill it and bring it into my life in that way. Something that has really stuck with me throughout all of this is affirmations. And I'm really big with this with my students. And I think that it was explained to me a long time ago that, our subconscious and our conscious minds, like, they don't speak to each other really. So if and it was explained that, like, when we were watching a movie, have you ever cried when you're watching a movie? Like, that that's an actor. That this is a story. That this is Hollywood. But that doesn't stop your subconscious for feeling those emotions and going through that and crying and feeling for that character. Or when you're reading a book and a fictional character dies or goes through something, and we feel that. And that's how affirmations work too. So you need to start believing in yourself. And so I just started thinking, like, what are some things in my life I want to change? What are some things that I want to believe in? What are some things that I want to do to feel better about myself? And writing those things down, recording myself saying those things, listening to those affirmations as I drive to work each morning. And I realized I was growing so much faster. And then all of a sudden I was believing those affirmations, and I would have to change those affirmations. So I'm a really big believer on figuring out where you want to be, writing affirmations for getting there, and then seeking that out.
Thank you, Mrs. Van Ness. Next up, we have Mrs. Rossi.
I love everything that Ms. Van Ness just shared. And I actually want to say that self-care kind of carries a stigma too. There are people who have ingrained in them through a variety of means and measures an idea that taking time for yourself or caring for yourself it isn't something that, it doesn't, I don't know, like add to your productivity, or it doesn't, it's important to put others' needs first and not your own. And so I also think that it's hard when we're trying to get everything right to understand the value of learning self-care techniques, because self-care can be another place that we can like overly judge ourselves and create a lot of anxiety and stress around doing it. And so we have to sort of get out of our comfort zone and say, we matter. And we think about what we would say to a friend who is struggling with stress or struggling with, overwork, overcommitment. What would we say to that person? We have to speak that kind of softness and kindness to ourselves. And so what Ms. Van Ness was saying about affirmations and about making those affirmations connect to our lives and what we need to hear, and believing in ourselves and seeing that growth and understanding that we can give better when we feel better, and we can take care of ourselves and be a model to those around us who we want to know that they can take care of themselves too. And so it's, I think that this is a lifelong journey for a lot of us. And I'm so grateful because I love the idea of self-help books and podcasts and TED Talks and whatever it is that connects you back to this idea that you have permission to take care of yourself. And you have permission to do the things that you need to do to fill your vessel so that when you're out in the world trying to provide care and support to others, you can effectively do that.
Thank you so much, Ms. Rawson. Now I'll throw it off to Caitlin.
Yeah, I absolutely love what Ms. Rawson was talking about the stigma actually surrounding self-care, because I know for me, when this whole talk about self-care at pretty much throughout the end of high school to now college, it's like, am I doing self-care correctly? Because when you have social media, you see all of these different videos, whether it's on TikTok or YouTube, of everyone having their own self-care methods. And it's like reading or writing, walking, nature, things like that. And I'm like, I tried all these things. They don't really work for me. And so then I get anxiety and overwhelmed about how can I help myself surrounding my own self-care. And I think because while I was doing all of those different things and trying things out, I wasn't okay with being alone. And that's when I realized that's what I had to work on. And so what finally ended up working for me was going to a cafe by myself, doing my own thing. Because while I wasn't really alone in the space, because obviously there are other people coming into the cafe, studying, doing their own thing, having conversations, I was still in my own world, but with people. And that's truly has helped me. Whenever I have anxiety or feeling down about myself and I really don't want to stay in bed, I go to a cafe with my laptop, just working on whatever I can. And another thing is I also love thrifting. It's definitely so fun for me. I also have my own small business where I go and thrift and resell the clothes as well. So being able to thrift, finding these different treasures, which is so random, and I absolutely love it, being my own form of self-care, because it brings me a lot of happiness when you find like the perfect shirt or the perfect pair of shoes. But yeah, those are my methods of self-care.
Thank you, Caitlin. And last we have Eden.
I definitely love what everyone is saying. I wanted to jump back to what Ms. Rawson was saying about how self-care is like stigmatized, and sometimes we feel guilty about taking care of ourselves. And I think that's so real because, like she was saying, we're so gracious to others and telling them about taking time for themselves. But then when it comes to ourselves, we definitely forget and we're not as gracious. And I think it's taking a step back and reminding ourselves to be gracious to us and just, you know, taking care of ourselves in whatever it means to be self-care, if that makes sense. Like Caitlin was saying, like other people's methods of self-care didn't really feel like self-care to me either, but sometimes just like, you know, taking a nap or, you know, just refreshing yourself. My friend and I, like my best friend, she calls it rejuvenation days, and she just does everything. She cleans her room, she just restarts herself, and that's what self-care means to her. And the definition just like changes from person to person. But I also love what Ms. Vanessa was saying about affirmations. I'm a huge believer of what you speak upon yourself is what you actually believe. So just speaking life and like truth to myself is definitely how I take care of myself, because I've noticed in my life, whatever I speak upon myself or even think in my head is how I genuinely feel and what I'm genuinely thinking. So reminding myself that I'm loved, I'm beautiful, I'm strong, I'm worthy is definitely a big form of self-care in my life.
Thank you, Eden. And now Ms. Gannigan will go.
So I wanted to piggyback off of the positive affirmations. Something that I've been doing for a few years with my preschoolers is we practice mindful activities, mindfulness, a time where we need to take a brain break, but our brain break, we say positive affirmations. It's been an extreme, I can't even explain what it has done to for my preschoolers, that they're second, third grade now, and families are sending me pictures of children in restaurants when they're anxious because their table wasn't ready and they're sitting on a bench practicing mindful activities. So I'm amazed at what mindful activities can do for children and as an adult as well. I was a teen mom, and self-care wasn't really important to me at that time. As my children grew older, I realized that I needed to have self-care. So in the beginning, taking that trip by myself and my friends, I felt guilty. There was a stigma. Look at her. She has 4 kids and she's on a trip with her friends. But it helped me to come back to my kids in a brighter environment for me. I was good. I made sure that I had a break. Inside, outside, all of that. It felt better. And I think that that's the guilty feeling that mothers feel, that they should not be taking self-care breaks, especially trips. So now I do it every 6 months.
Thank you, Ms. Gannigan. Lastly, I'd like to ask Dr. Subba about his self-care and also touch on burnout as a mental health professional from hearing all the patients and such and all their stories. And go ahead, Dr. Subba.
I think that everyone brought up, I mean, excellent things. The biggest point that I can probably add to this is the point, is to drive that point home, that self-care is different for everyone. And I think one of the presenters, they had said that they were becoming anxious because they weren't fitting into the proper mold of what self-care is supposed to be. You know, being aware, right? That mindfulness, part of mindfulness is being aware of what is right for you. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's right for everyone else, but you have to try to find that. I think it was Caitlin that said that she went to a coffee shop or a cafe. It's just by being around people, being in that environment, and just chilling out and just kind of being, thinking to herself, and that was her way of self-care. That's awesome that she was able to find that. I would take that one step further, and I would say to her, if we were having like a session or something, like, let's try to explore that. Let's try to see what that means. Let's see, being in that environment, being in that type of situation, that's what makes you happy. That's what gives you peace. There may be something to that, just by you like trying to explore a little bit deeper into what else she can do other than that, to also give herself peace and put her mind at ease. As far as for myself, it is difficult for a lot of mental health professionals, because this is what we do all day. We're trained in it. This is our job, but still, it does take an emotional toll, and that's why I'm lucky and glad. I have people around me that are also trained. My wife is a physician assistant. She's trained in mental health. A lot of my partners and things like that, we discuss a lot of complex cases and things like that. That or things that patients have told us that stick in your mind. So having that discussion and having the therapy yourself as a mental health professional, I think is really important as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Subba. As we wrap up our conversation on mental health with our amazing panel, I'd just like to ask all our panelists to give a message to our wonderful guests and viewers. What do you want to tell our guests and viewers? And we will start with Eden.
I think the number one thing just to remember is how you make an impact on every single person you meet, no matter that you think you just don't matter. You genuinely do. Like the story Miss Vanessa was telling us about the student, she impacted and she had no clue. Just reach out to people, make sure your friends are okay, ask them how they're really feeling, how they're mentally, spiritually and financially. Like the example Shaun gave us of Rico's like a reach out method, but I definitely think that you should just remember that you matter and you're loved.
Thank you, Eden. Next is Mrs. Van Ness.
I love to say, don't say anything to yourself that you wouldn't say to a friend. So if you're not going to tell your friend, oh, you look fat today, which you won't, right? Don't say to yourself, like, oh, I look fat today. If you're not going to say to your friend, oh, you're having a really bad day, like, don't tell yourself that you're having a really bad day. Like, be kind to yourself. Treat yourself like your own best friend. All of those nice things and nice compliments that you would say to your friend, say those to yourself as well. You're worth it and you are loved.
Thank you so much, Ms. Van Ness. Next, we have Ms. Gannigan.
For anyone listening, in case you haven't been told lately, I want to read you a quote. You are loved, you are important, and you matter. So if you need to get help, ask someone, anyone, a teacher, a friend, your parents, me. you matter. You're important.
Thank you, Ms. Gannigan. Next, we have Caitlin.
Thank you to everyone who's watching. I just want to say that everyone is a storyteller. Everyone has something to share. So just please be willing to listen, understand, and validate each other's experiences. I am so proud of all of you for being here and being alive and continuing your story. Thank you.
Thank you, Caitlin. Next, we have Dr. Subba.
I would say don't feel guilty. Don't neglect yourself. Don't neglect your needs. We're here. We're available, and we're happy to help. Every single person on this panel seems to have a lot of passion in reducing the mental health stigma and trying to get resources out to people that need help. If you need help, call us. Call someone. We're here for you, and we'll be happy to help.
Thank you so much, Dr. Subba. And last but not least, we have Ms. Rossi.
I just want to echo what everyone is telling you. You are loved just as you are right now. And people love you and they want you here. I love so much what Caitlin said about everyone being a storyteller. And you have a story to tell, and we want to know your story. And if you're struggling, reach out. And if you have a friend who you think is struggling, go with your gut. Reach out to someone so that your friend can get support too. And just lead with kindness. And like Ms. Vanessa said too, bring that kindness back to yourself. Everybody has said so many beautiful things and has shared so many wonderful things. Ms. Gannigan talking about just the fact that you matter. Hang on to those things and know that that's that is true, and that you have to tell yourself and love yourself and take a step forward and hope. There's always a way forward.
Thank you so much to our incredible panelists. Thank you for your commitment to this very critical conversation. We appreciate you all taking the time out of your schedules to be here with us tonight. For more information about Anytown Las Vegas, please visit www.anytownlasvegas.org. And don't forget to follow us on social media at Anytown Las Vegas. We are on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Our next event is this Wednesday, June 16th at 5 p.m. We are hosting Holocaust survivor Ben Lesser, who will share his eyewitness account of the Holocaust, along with advocating for change by teaching tolerance. The event is completely free and open to anyone over the age of 11 years old. You can sign up by going over to our Instagram link or our Facebook page. We also have another suicide prevention training via the You Mean More campaign and partnered with the Nevada Office of Suicide Prevention that we are hosting on June 23rd from 3 to 5:15 p.m. And that registration link is also on our Instagram link tree and our Facebook page. And one last big, huge thanks to all our panelists for opening up this conversation tonight. Don't forget, to all our viewers, you are seen, you are heard, and you are loved. Have a good night, everyone.